Hi everyone, it's Julie. Today is day 19 of the 31 Days of Christmas Cards series brought to you by the Creative Design team. If you're just joining us today, you can find the link to the first 18 days down below and get all caught up. For today's video, I'll be sharing two cards. One shaker slimline card and the second one will be made using the leftover pieces. Now I wanted to use these small Christmas trees. I'm going to use those thin cuts and I'm going to run them across the slimline card. I'm going to have 6 of them. So I'm going to start with 3, I'm going to line them all up, and then I'm going to run it a second time in my die cutting machine to create 6 little trees across this card. I'm going to bring in these bright bitty brads and we're going to have some fun with them. You definitely need 3D foam tape for this project. Now, I was trying to find a way to make this simple without measuring everything, but they kind of need to line up. So if you're really good at eyeballing, you can skip all of this altogether, but if you need a little bit of help, your mat, your grid mat, really helps this process along. Now the idea here is that I'm going to individually create section in back of those trees. I want to individually put in those bright bitty beads, and they're all going to be different in back of those trees. Now I thought I was good at eyeballing things. Turns out not so much. So I made myself a little spacer. The spacer is the same width as the thin 3D foam tape, and I'm going to use that to make sure that I'm leaving myself enough space. Here I showed you that I use the posted removable label tape just to tack down those little trees. When I run them through my die cutting machine, they don't move. It's really important for this step of the project. Now you'll see here that the middle tree is a tiny bit taller, so I'm actually going to just eyeball that and move him down so that they're all kind of lining up together. I'm going to pull those off, and then I've got these little trees that were begging to be turned into a card. So I'm going to use those to create card number 2. So I'm following along here and I'm adding my little trees and I'm using my little spacer. So this is a 1/4 inch just piece of cardstock, and it really helped this process along. I knew that by using that in between I had enough space because I want to individually create sections in back of each of those trees. So we're going to pop those off and we have our 6 trees ready to go. So the next step here is to create those little sections. I'm going to pop that acetate right on top, and I'm just using here liquid glue. I'm just using a little bit, but I am going all around the trees because I don't want that to open. I want to make sure that it's nice and secure. So I'm just going to pop that on the back side of my front panel, and then I'm going to start adding my 3D foam tape. So here at the bottom I'm using the widest 3D foam tape, and I'm also putting it directly below the trees because when those little beads fall down, you don't want them to fall all the way down at the bottom of the card. You still want to see them at the bottom of the tree. So the top one here is at the top of the panel, and you've got these 2 nice pieces of foam tape running along this front piece. Now this is where that spacing was really important. So I'm adding my thin 3D foam tape, so the thickness is what I'm referring to here, and I am dividing up all of those little trees into sections because I want to add all of my little beads at the back, and I want them to all be different colors. Now this front panel here is going to really help us with putting all of this together. Here I'm going to hollow out the center and I'm cutting it away 3/8 of an inch. So I'm leaving myself a 3/8 of an inch border that is going to go on the base card, and then that inside piece is going to act as a cover to kind of hold all of the beads inside. Now you'll see that in just a minute. So let's cut this piece out, and I'm kind of being careful here so that I'm not going over, and sometimes you kind of miss a little bit, so you just snip it off, and now you've got two pieces. So this one here goes on the base card, and I'm going to just glue that with liquid glue. I'm just going to pop that on the front of the card, so you've got the beginning of your base card. And I like to use liquid glue here because I can make sure that all of my edges are nice and square with the base card. It's going to secure that down, and then I'm going to see that I've got that really nice border, and this guy is actually the cover. It's actually going to hold everything in place. Now this is really important. Like, these little beads will pop and will glue to pretty much everything. So in order to keep them in their little sections, keep the backing of your 3D foam tape on, and that way it'll make it a lot easier on yourself. Here I'm adding a little bit of those silver confetti. I just kind of finished it all off. I'm going to screw those little tops on to make sure that my little beads don't fall everywhere, and we're going to start putting this together. Now you have to start with the vertical pieces. So I'm just removing the backing, and I'm going to work in a section. So see here, I'm kind of pushing everything to the center of that section so that it doesn't stick to the 3D foam tape, and I'm going to remove all the way up to the center of the card. I gotta move them over because they're tiny, and they like to pop out of that little section quite a bit. So now I'm going to add that back piece to my card. So that is going to kind of hold and close them all inside of all of the sections. And then I can go ahead and remove the other backing and just finish off the assembly for this part of the project. Now it's a little time consuming to separate them all. I guess you could mix them all up in the center, but I really liked that they were all individually separated by the color. Now this really only works if you have a small print on your pattern paper or if you're using a solid color. So here you see me pulling off the 3D foam tape on the length, and now everything is nice and secure, and those little beads are not coming off. So this was the easiest way for me to create those little sections and making sure that those little beads don't pop out. I'm going to add a little bit of silver twine just to add a little bit of design flair to the card. The card itself is really simple. There's not a lot going on except for there's quite a bit of construction. So I guess I'm contradicting myself. It looks nice and clean, but there's a little bit of technique and construction that has to happen in order to separate all of those beads. But I'm really, really happy on how it turned out. It's really, really cool. So the next step here, I wanted to add a sentiment, and of course I don't want to cover my little trees and the fact that all of those little beads are all individually put in there. So I've gone ahead and I've stamped the sentiment on vellum, and I did use, now it's a retired product, but you probably have it in your stash, it's the silver tinsel embossing powder, and it just really looked really, really nice with this card. I've just cut the two pieces, so the Merry Christmas, I've just kind of separated the word because the length of it was perfect for this Slimline card. And I've gone ahead here and I'm adding quite a bit of glue on the back side, and you'll see that your vellum tends to curl, and that's okay. Just put a block on it, set it to the side, and then we get to work with the second card. So I'm just going to pop that onto the side to let it dry. Now this card here, we're using the back side of that pattern paper. And that pattern paper will be available in a couple of weeks, so you're going to want to get your hands on it. And here I am adding really pretty snowbanks, and I did use here the white glitter paper, and it just looked perfect. So we're going to go ahead and assemble this card. I'm going to fold that over. I'm going to pop that pattern paper right on top, and to me that pattern paper looked like wind blowing all of those swirls, and then you've got your little trees that are going to be hiding in back of those little snow hills. I don't know, it was just kind of, it all came together perfectly, and this was like card number 2. So sometimes these cards just happen, and this one just did. It was really nice. So I'm adding again a lot of 3D foam tape. I'm going to add elements to pop my trees and to pop my little snowbanks, and I'm just making sure that I have enough space for my sentiment. I'm going to flip my grid mat onto the back side, and I'm going to stamp those little trees. Now this new Jingle paper collection, it's actually called Jingle Joy. It's not, you know, the traditional color. It's got raspberry, clover, and black, and I really liked this combination for this card here. So I've done a couple in raspberry, a couple in clover, and these last ones here are done in black. So we're going to wipe off our little stamp image. We're going to put it back on the Carriere sheet, and we're going to assemble this card. This card actually comes together a little bit easier, not as much technique to put it all together. You're just going to glue this all. So as you can see here, I'm adding 3D foam tape, and I'm adding the thin one, the one that's not as thick, and we're just going to pop that at the bottom of this card. And I'm going to trim off the excess that's sticking out there in just a second. I just felt that it was a little bit thin, so I thought, okay, we'll just cut that off, and then we're going to add the second snowbank, and we're going to proceed with doing this card. Now I really hope you're enjoying all of these cards, because I know I am. It's kind of a surprise for me as well, and it's kind of getting me in the festive mood to get all of my Christmas cards done. Here you see me adding the liquid glue right in back of that sentiment, and even if it's on vellum, because I actually embossed it with that silver tinsel embossing powder, you don't see the glue at all. So we're going to pop those little trees here and there. Some have 3D foam tape, some do not, some are in back, some are in the front, and it just gives it that really nice little scenery. Those little black trees kind of needed a little something, so I'm going ahead here and I'm going to pull out the Stickles, and it's the silver Stickles, and I'm just kind of testing it here on a piece of scratch paper. I don't want to mess up my project, so it's a really good thing to try it out before you apply it on your project. And you know what? This card is done. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you've picked up a few helpful tips on how to create individually divided shaker windows, and come back and check out Katie's project tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe to all of the Creative Design Team's channel. I've posted all of their links down below. Have yourself a wonderful day. I'll see you next Monday.